Hey all, welcome to a video where I'm going to discuss the current video game collecting and reselling market trends. I'm Brian from Gravy Flips, where we buy, sell, and collect video games, collectibles, and furniture in order to earn some extra profit in our side hustle or to build our video game collections. Before I discuss the current market for video game collecting and reselling, please don't forget to enter yourself into the sweepstakes being held tomorrow, October 31st at 10 p.m. on Halloween night for the giveaway of this Sega Dreamcast Marvel vs. Capcom game complete in the box. All you have to do is subscribe and comment the title of the game, and you will be entered into the giveaway. I will be shipping it out for free, so it won't cost you a dime. So, one of the cool things about being a collector is you have to figure out when the best time to buy and sell your video games is. But unfortunately, nowadays, in today's macro market, it's incredibly challenging to see what video games are going up in value, and it's even more challenging to see which ones are going down. So when you're on the hunt for video games, or if you're on the hunt to buy collections to resell for profit, you really need to understand the current market trends. And 2023, into the fourth quarter that we're in right now, is one of the most confusing times to be a game collector or video game reseller. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you specifically which consoles and collections are going up in value, which ones are remaining stagnant, and which ones you may want to avoid for the time being, or the ones that you may want to be buying the dip. There are some surprising pieces of information in this piece, so please join me as we study the market and look at the overall macro and micro trends in the video game reselling. Now before I begin, I just wanted to say that I'm going to be looking at the average shown on price charting for each console and not focusing on the median. The reason I do so is because each console has certain outliers that will affect the data. While I should keep in mind that the median excludes the outliers in each data set, I want to include them because there's way too many to forget about on certain consoles. So even though we have a few games that are worth over $1,000 in each one, I still think that their values are worth keeping in the study that we're doing. And to start things off, I'm going to be discussing the PlayStation 2, which has been going up slightly in value since 2000. Now as I click and peruse the data, I'm using the search function that is the interactive function that's available on the price charting website, and unlike a lot of the consoles that I would expect, like honestly I'd expect GameCube to be going up in value, which it's not. I'll talk about that later in the video. I'm surprised to see that the PlayStation 2 is actually on a steady incline. It's almost linear. I could almost graph this on a linear chart over the years. That since 2020, the PS2 had an average video game value of $8.17. By October of 2021, that average was up to $11.93. And a lot of the times what I'm seeing after looking at all this data is that after 2022, the average video game values have actually taken a plunge as the market has gone south. This is not the case for the PlayStation 2. The average has steadily gone up about $2 per year. In September of 2022, a average video game for the PS2 is worth about $13. And here we are now in October of 2023, and the value is up 1 year later, and it's up $1.07 to have an average of $14.07 per PS2 game. That is quite substantial. Obviously that means that the PS2 grails are going up in value, because if you have a high value item going up high in value, that's going to skew the average to one side. The median value is $8 per game, but I definitely think that if you are a complete PS2 collector or reseller, it is definitely worth buying PS2 games to see where this market goes. It's not a buying the dip opportunity. You're paying the highest prices that have ever happened for the PlayStation 2 at this time. Next up is the very collectible PSP. Unlike what I expected, the PSP games are actually going up steadily. They had quite the increase in December of 2002, where they shot from $14 per average game all the way up to around $17. They dropped in July of 23 by about $1 and are now holding at an average of $16.86 per game. The PSP is steadily climbing in value, just like the PS2, so maybe this is the top of the market, or this is a time to buy because the values are only going up. In the past year, since October of 2022, the value of each game per average has gone from $14 to $16.86. so that makes an increase of about 15%. Moving on to the PlayStation 3. I was quite surprised to see that the values of this console hasn't gone up yet. They've actually remained fairly stagnant, but there is a slight upward increase going on since November of 2022, when the value was $13.86 per game. The value has gone up by about $1.20 to today, where the average is about $15 per game. There aren't many heavy hitters on the PS3, so the medium price is not that far down, but this may be a good time to get into PlayStation 3 collecting if you've never done so. Okay, moving on to the PlayStation 1. The PlayStation 1 is a console that I've always considered to be one that's going to go up in value. In February of 2022, it had an average value of about $9.50, but here we are today at October 2023, and the value is at $16.84 per game. That's an increase of about 75%. I'm doing that math roughly off the top of my head. The values of PS1 games are going up very quickly, year over year. This time last year, the average value of games in October 22 was $15.62, and it's gone up about $1.30 since then. So if you're trying to put together a PS1 collection, I don't know if we're at the top of the market, but the market trends are showing that the values have never gone down, and you may want to pick them up now before the values keep going up another $1.20 per year. Now, one of the main reasons why I do these kind of market analysis is because my personal bias toward Nintendo is something that always comes out whenever I see video game collections that I want to buy. If there's a lot of Nintendo games, I tend to skew toward them. Sometimes I'll overpay, and that's a personal bias problem that I have to fix. But when I look at this data, I'm surprised to see that there is only one Nintendo console that is actually going up steadily in value. During COVID, there was a huge bump in value for a lot of Nintendo consoles. A lot of people started going back to the old Nintendo games, and I'm going to talk about it in a few minutes about the consoles and collections that are going down in value. But the only Nintendo console that is going up in value right now, consistently, without having any downfalls, is the Nintendo DS. And when I look at the data from September of 2020, so about 3 years ago, the average game for the DS was at like $8.45. And nowadays, and then last year, the value went up to $11.29, and now the value of the DS is $12.20 per game. And that means that I would consider them a fair price, because there's no indication that they're going to be going down in value. When I sell them online, Nintendo DS games are the quickest ones to go. And right now, after looking at this data, I'm definitely going to be putting out my tentacles to try. Okay, and now the more surprising part of the data set that I've looked at and consoles that are going up is the fact that the original Xbox is actually one of the highest growing in value consoles overall over the past 2 years. And right now the Xbox is on quite the upward trajectory. Since April, we'll go back to January of 2023, the value of each game, the average, was about $8.76 per loose game. And since then, the value is $10.30, which means the values over the past 10 months of loose Xbox games have gone up 25%. And that data is really interesting to me because I have maybe 25 of the original Xbox consoles hanging out on a shelf in my basement that I've been thinking about just bringing to the dump, because people really don't buy the original Xbox consoles, and I avoid them like the plague. But now that I'm looking at this data trend and I'm seeing that the games are actually going up by 25% year over year, this is the highest growth that I've seen out of any console, and it beats any of the Nintendo consoles, which just blows my mind. That the fact that the majority of Nintendo consoles right now are actually falling rapidly in value. Now, let's keep continuing with the Xbox 360. Believe it or not, this is another console that's going up in value. In 2019, it actually finished a 12-year decline in overall loose disc values. And in 2019, it hit about $8 per game. But since then, it didn't seem to be that affected by the COVID FOMO, the fear of missing out. It's been going up about $1, about 75 cents per year. So in 2020, the average game was about $9 in December of that year. The following year, it was close to 10. And 2022, the value was about $10.50. And right now, the average value is $11.55 on average per loose disc Xbox 360 game, which, after following a 12-year decline in value, this shows me that people are starting to go back and buy Xbox 360 games. And that is totally counterintuitive to what I would expect. Let's get into the games that are actually dropping in value, and you're going to start to see why I'm so surprised by this overall macro and micro market analysis. To start things off, we move toward the Sega Genesis, which during the COVID time hit a maximum value average per game of about $23 per game, and has now gone down to about $19 per game by average, which is pretty significant to have a $4 or $3 to $4 overall drop. I'm rounding up in a couple instances there. In 1 year since its precipice in July and August of 2022, to be down $3 means that people have either stopped collecting or the FOMO is kind of going out. Before COVID, really, in October 2020, or more toward March 2020, the average game value was about $14.17 per game. I don't know if the values are going to start heading that way, but if you are buying collections and you come across Sega games, Sega Genesis in particular, I definitely would think twice and check the market trends for those individual games to see if they're going up or down in value, so that you can make your purchase price a little more congruent with the fact that you might be buying a depreciating asset. Okay, moving on to the wonderful Nintendo Switch. Back in 2019, personally, like 2017, 2019, I used to buy Nintendo Switch collections all the time. If you could find any Nintendo Switch console, you were, king of the world. There was a steady increase in the value when COVID started in 2020, where the average game value was about $25, and it went up to close to about $30.64 in 2021, 2022. But since then, and much to my surprise, the value has been going down about $1.50 per year. So right now, in October of 2023, there's an average value of just over $27 per game, and that's pretty normal for newer consoles. They have to go through a time of down. So this may be the time to buy the dip if you are a Nintendo Switch collector, because the other lowest point that the console had was in September of 2019, when the average game price went to $24.27. So this might be the bottom, might not be the bottom, but if you're collecting or reselling, just keep in mind Switch games are going down at the moment. Okay, now we're moving on to the Nintendo GameCube. And I have to tell you that this begins the most surprising part of this entire video. You have to keep in mind, the GameCube was one of the most sought-after consoles, and their video games went up almost 100% in some cases since the beginning of COVID. So let's look at this data here. At the beginning of December of 2019, the average value of a GameCube game was $11.88. It shot up to $32.55 in September of 2022. So I stand corrected. That's actually almost a 3 times increase. So that game went up almost 200% that would make it like almost 300% in about a 3-year period. It peaked in June of 2023 $35.68 per game, and since then we've gone down. Since June of 2023, we've gone down to about $32.80 per average loose game. So it looks like the GameCube is starting to go down. I thought it was going to keep shooting up, but it's really been stagnant since July of 2022 when COVID was really kind of starting to come to a close. So if you're a GameCube collector, this might be the bottom, this might be the top, and the market's going back down. I know disc rot is something that a lot of collectors are dealing with, where having their games just in their cases is causing them to go bad. So definitely check your GameCube games frequently to make sure that they're not going bad. But yeah, the GameCube seems to be going down in value. Okay, moving on to the original Nintendo Entertainment Center system, sorry. The values on this, when I'm looking at the average, you can actually see a clearer increase and decrease in overall value. I know a lot of people are probably hitting their head on the wall saying that we should be using the median price here since we're talking about a wide variety of data sets. I would argue that when we are looking at the average value of each game, of course Little Samson is going to be skewing this data pretty high. I think that since we are trying to talk about collecting and reselling as a whole, that we should include those increases and decreases in value, because a large decrease in value of Little Samson is going to affect the average price enormously. So if somebody's trying to buy a collection that has a Little Samson, it's something that we need to keep in mind. Luckily, the median and the average prices have been following the same trajectory. If the average goes up, the median goes up. If the median goes down, the average goes down. It seems that in 2022, the NES system hit a precipice at $47 per game. It was at about $26 per game at the beginning of COVID back in 2020, 2019. Right now, the value has gone down to closer to $43, and it seems to be going down steadily. So, when you're buying NES collections, make sure that you are checking the values twice, because it seems like the higher value eggs, the grails, are going down in value, which means that people are paying less for the loose cartridges. Okay, so let's check out some more depreciation of Nintendo stuff. We're going over the Super Nintendo. Same thing as kind of with the SNES, or with the NES. The value in 2022 hit its all-time high of about $40.34 per loose cartridge. The average now has gone down about $4 to $36 per game. In November of 2019, the value was at $21. So now that we're seeing that the value of these games are starting to go down, I really don't know if it's time to buy the dip or if it's time to sell, because the macroeconomics of the economy are going down, and we could be a day away from a financial crisis. So this may or may not be the time to sell your video game SNES collection. It depends on your own research, but that's the market trend for that. Let's move on to the Nintendo 64. Okay, so this is the last console that we're looking at, and the last one that is really depreciating in value. All the other ones I chose not to talk about because they're probably stagnant or aren't really doing anything worth mentioning. So for them, just keep it the status quo. The value of the N64, it went up pretty sharply from October of 2019, having a value of about $17 per game. Went up to $35 per game value in March of 2022, so it more than doubled. That's more than a 100% increase. In March of 2022, it was at its highest point at $35, and then it went down in April by about almost $9 per game, which is quite the surprise. And it held that value all the way through till May 2023, where it sat at about that $25, $26 range. And then between May and June, it shot up to $35 in value again, and now it's been steadily declining since July. to its current point at $32.76 per game. So technically that is a decrease. It is still at the top of the highest value it's ever held. So this may be a time to sell your N64 collection if you're thinking about doing something else or you just want to have some cash on hand. I can't guarantee you that though. The market can go either way. Or this could be a time for you to buy the dip if you want to invest in N64 games. Because there are a lot of people that actually do buy video games just to invest in them.